A synapse is the tiny gap between two neurons. Neurons are nerve cells that carry electrical signals, but here's the annoying twist. They don't actually touch each other. There's always a microscopic gap. That gap is the synapse. So when an electrical impulse reaches the end of the first neuron, it cannot simply jump across. Biology is not that generous. Instead, the signal gets converted into chemicals called neurotransmitters. These chemicals are released from tiny vesicles at the end of the first neuron. They diffuse across the synapse, which is a slow process compared to electrical signals, and then bind to receptors on the next neuron. That binding triggers a new electrical impulse in the next neuron. So the full process is electrical signal, chemical transmission, electrical signal again. Synapses slow things down slightly because diffusion takes time, but they are essential. Without them, your nervous system would be rigid, less flexible, and basically unable to process complex information. They also allow one signal to be split into multiple pathways, or filtered, which is how the brain actually makes decisions instead of just screaming responses at everything. A reflex is one of those don't think about it, just survive systems. It is a fast, automatic response to a stimulus. The key idea is that it bypasses conscious thought, because your brain is too slow and indecisive to be trusted in emergencies. Think about touching something hot. If your brain had to analyze, debate, and approve the response, you'd already be cooking your fingerprints off. Reflexes exist to reduce damage and keep you alive. They are automatic, which means they happen without conscious control, and rapid, meaning they prioritize speed over deliberation. Some examples make this clearer. If bright light enters your eyes, your pupils automatically constrict. That protects the retina from damage. If you get shocked or scared, your body releases adrenaline immediately, preparing muscles and energy systems for action without asking your permission. The knee-jerk reflex is another classic example. When a doctor taps just below your kneecap, it stretches a tendon which activates sensory receptors. That signal travels to the spinal cord and immediately triggers a motor response, making your lower leg kick out. No thinking involved, just a built-in shortcut. Now, the reflex arc is the exact pathway a reflex takes. It always follows a specific route, and it never bothers involving conscious brain processing in a meaningful way. Here is the correct sequence, expanded so it actually makes sense instead of sounding like a robot checklist. A stimulus is first detected by receptor cells. These receptors are specialized to pick up changes in the environment, such as pressure, heat, or pain. Once the receptor is activated, it generates an electrical impulse in a sensory neuron. That sensory neuron carries the impulse into the central nervous system, usually the spinal cord. Inside the spinal cord, the signal passes through a synapse to a relay neuron. This is where the chemical neurotransmitters are released, diffuse across the synapse, and trigger a new electrical impulse. The relay neuron then passes the signal through another synapse to a motor neuron. Again, chemicals cross the synapse and restart the electrical signal. The motor neuron carries the impulse away from the central nervous system to an effector. The effector is usually a muscle or a gland. If it is a muscle, it contracts. If it is a gland, it secretes a chemical such as a hormone. Finally, this produces the response such as pulling your hand away or moving a limb. So the full flow is stimulus, receptor, sensory neuron, relay neuron, motor neuron, effector, response. Important detail that people mess up constantly. Impulses do not jump between neurons. They rely on chemical diffusion at synapses. If you write jump, you're basically describing fiction. Reflexes are faster than voluntary actions because they avoid the conscious brain. The spinal cord handles the processing directly. This reduces delay, which is exactly what you want when something is trying to injure you. Now, reaction time is related, but not the same thing. Reaction time is how long it takes from detecting a stimulus to producing a response. Even a reflex has a measurable reaction time, but voluntary reactions are slower because they involve conscious decision-making in the brain. Reaction time varies between individuals and can be affected by things like age, fatigue, and drugs such as caffeine. Caffeine can temporarily reduce reaction time because it stimulates the nervous system, making neurons more likely to fire quickly. A standard way to measure reaction time is the ruler drop test. One person holds a ruler vertically, and another person places their thumb and finger near the 0 mark without touching it. Without warning, the ruler is dropped. The participant catches it as quickly as possible. The distance it falls before being caught shows how fast the reaction is. A smaller distance means a faster reaction time. You repeat the test several times and calculate a mean value to improve reliability. Then you can introduce a factor, such as caffeine, and compare results after consumption. If you are doing this properly, you control variables carefully. Same person each time, same hand, same ruler, same starting position, and no caffeine beforehand unless that is your tested variable. Otherwise, your results are basically random noise pretending to be science. Safety matters too. Caffeine intake should be controlled and not excessive, and testing should avoid any unnecessary risk or distraction in a lab environment. Computers can measure reaction time more precisely. Instead of catching a ruler, the participant reacts to a visual stimulus on a screen, such as a color change, by clicking a mouse. This removes human measurement error and improves accuracy because computers record time in milliseconds. It also prevents prediction, since humans are good at subconsciously guessing patterns, even when they pretend they aren't. Now the practice questions, properly answered. Question: how do nerve impulses travel between two neurons? They travel across synapses using neurotransmitter chemicals. The electrical impulse triggers release of chemicals from the first neuron. These diffuse across the gap and then trigger a new electrical impulse in the next neuron. Question: what is a reflex? A reflex is a rapid, automatic response to a stimulus that happens without conscious control, usually to protect the body from harm or maintain basic functions. Question: do reflex arcs travel through conscious parts of the brain? No, they are processed mainly through the spinal cord or unconscious parts of the brain to make the response faster. Question: what neuron comes after the sensory neuron in a reflex arc? A relay neuron. Question: if the effector in a reflex arc is a muscle, what will the response be? The muscle will contract, producing movement. Question: what is the stimulus in stepping on a drawing pin? The sharp pain and pressure from the pin activating pain receptors in the skin. Question: what is the effector and how does it respond?
The effector is the leg muscle.
It contracts to pull the foot away from the pin. Question: complete the pathway of the reflex arc. Stimulus to receptor, to sensory neuron, to relay neuron, to motor neuron, to effector, to response. Question: a drug blocks chemicals crossing a synapse. Effect on reaction time? Reaction time would increase because impulses would be slowed or blocked at synapses, delaying signal transmission and response. Question: describe ruler reaction time experiment. The ruler is held vertically above a participant's hand. Without warning, it is dropped and the participant catches it as quickly as possible. The distance it falls before being caught is recorded and repeated several times to calculate a mean. Question: suggest 2 factors affecting reaction time. Caffeine intake and type of stimulus, such as visual versus auditory, both of which can change how quickly the nervous system responds.